Yeah. That's weird. Did you write it on the side?
No.
Yeah, just write your name on the right column. Hello.
I'm happy. My mom said that I have to say that I was happy.
How are you doing?
Oh, wow. That's what's the answer or something.
Yes. Got a preference of color?
Pink, but
You got that? Okay.
I'll
Okay.
sit.
Wherever you like. Over here.
I didn't see any prayer. There was no prayer to pick up today, or was it just the sheet that you filled with your hours?
Just the hours if people need it. Yeah. Basically, today's going to be a review, and we're going to make sure we have everything. There's nothing really. I guess we'll get started. Everybody's more or less here. How is everybody? Good? All right. Why don't we all stand up and we'll start with a prayer. We'll do an Our Father and a Hail Mary. Okay. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, and now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So today's kind of a review class. Basically, in confirmation class, there's some things that we have to sort of get through to prove that you guys are ready to receive the sacrament of confirmation. Specifically, there's prayers that we all should know and a list of questions that we should all know the answers to. A week from today, we're going to have, for lack of a better way to say it, it's kind of like a midterm. Not really a midterm, but basically a week from tonight, we're all going to be here together. It's going to be this class and plus the other class. Parents are welcome. They're not required to be here, but they're invited. Father Camille will be here. And basically, we're going to go through what we've kind of covered so far. And, because this is a very big class, I try to keep things very simple and not get too crazy, giving you guys assignments. So everything has been handouts and folders, etc. So basically, we're just going to kind of make sure we're all on the same page, make sure everybody has everything, so that next week when we're all here, we can sort of walk through it all together. And like I said, nobody's caught without their stuff. Nobody's unprepared. Does everyone here have a folder? Does anyone here not have a folder? Yeah. Anybody need a folder? Everybody else good? Everybody has one? Don't shut it, go. How about the sign-up sheet for service hours? Does everybody have one of those? Need one? Was that? Yeah. Okay, the prayers. So who needs, first of all, I know there's one or two people here that are here for the first time. Who has none of the prayers? You guys have none of them?
I have one.
All right, so everybody else has at least a couple. Is anybody missing the first one that we gave out? It was the sign of the cross, the Our Father, the Hail Mary. Does everybody here have that one? You need one?
No, I don't.
Okay. I know you don't.
Yeah, that's fine.
We got the package, we have all the right.
They have all. Is anybody missing this one, sign of the cross, Our Father, the Hail Mary? Good? And just, I'm sure you guys probably know them, hopefully, but I want you to be able to just hold it up next week when we're here. You need one? The next one, yes.
Did they change the Hail Mary?
Sorry?
Did they change the Hail Mary?
Wow, what does it say? What was it?
I swear it was, what's in our, wait. The Lord with you.
Well, there's always a, I say you more. Same thing. Anybody else need the Apostles' Creed? Anybody else need this one? The Apostles' Creed? You will have 4 pages of prayers altogether when we're done. This would be the second one. How about the prayer of St. Francis? Everybody have it? Okay. And I think this next one, the prayer for the deceased, I'm pretty sure you guys don't have this one yet. Any of you have? You have? Pass those out? Thank you. Move.
That was awful. Oh my God.
Okay, so everyone here should have 4 sheets with prayers on it. We good? So next week when Father Camille is here and possibly parents, and I say take out this prayer and we'll all say it together, you guys will be good, right?
Yeah.
Everybody? Love it. Love it! Okay. Questions? 4 pages of questions. The first page was 1 through 7. Who's here again for the first time? Some of them?
Oh, that's us working.
All right, so who has some of the questions, but they just don't have 1 through 7? Okay.
I don't,
You need all of them?
I have just the is there anything after?
The last one is, yeah, 22 through 25.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody has 1 through 7? Or otherwise? Okay, 8 through 16. Good? 8 through 16. Who needs 8 through 16? Eight through 16. Anybody else need it? Good? Anybody else need 8 through 16? So everyone now has 8 through 16, right? Perfect.
Oh, I don't. Oh.
16 through 21. You raise your hand for questions. Everybody's good, 16 to 21? Everybody in here has it, right? Everybody good? 16 to 21? Nobody's gonna be surprised next week? Love it. Twenty-two through 25. Did I name it? Yeah. 22 through 25. This is the last one. You should have 4 sheets.
Yeah.
Four pages, starting one and finishing 25. All right, so everyone now has a folder. Everyone has 4 pages with prayers on it, and everyone has 4 pages with questions on it. So next week when we're here, I say please take out your folders and please take out questions or prayers. We all say them. Parents are going to be thrilled. And they're going to say, my kid's going to get confirmation. This is great. Right?
Yeah.
Cool. What time is it? Can we go home yet? Who's here for the first time tonight? There you are. Anybody else? Everybody's been here before?
Yeah.
Once. How come only once?
I have like a certain choir.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
It's hard to.
And all others have. What's that? Best night of the week? So if anybody wants to move up front, we're going to just kind of review our last classes and sort of talk about the things that we talked about in the last few classes. If you want to just chill where you are, that's totally fine too. So we've done the commandments, right? First class we were here, we talked about the very first commandment, and I did a big presentation on God and why I think science actually confirms the existence of at least a higher power as opposed to randomness. Does everybody remember that class?
Yeah.
What do you remember from that class? Was there anything that you're like, oh, I wish I didn't say?
Just like don't cheat on your neighbor and all that stuff, and then you explaining in depth about it.
Okay.
I don't know exactly what.
What is the first commandment, by the way?
Isn't it I am God?
Yes,
That you should not have other gods before me.
absolutely, you're right. I am the Lord your God. You shall not have any other gods before me. Absolutely. And right, and the thing that we were trying to sort of talk about is like, do we believe in God, and does the belief in God, is it strictly spiritual, or can you use your brain and like, do you have to shut your brain off to believe in God? No, right? What is the second commandment?
Don't say the Lord's name in vain.
Absolutely, right. And what are some of the ways? Well, before I say anything, what does that mean?
Like, don't see it, say it in like a way, like where you just God.
Where you're.
A way to like disrespect God.
Okay. Absolutely. What are other ways that we take the Lord's name in vain?
When someone's never angry, they'll say, God.
Right. Sometimes we. That happens. One of the things about this commandment that I find very interesting is that one of the things that they talk about a lot is if you do something wrong and you sort of do it in God's name, like let's say, for example, you went to somebody's house and you said, hey, I'm from the church, I'm collecting for something, but you weren't really. You just took money, right? And you're stealing, but you made it 10 times worse because you did it under the guise of doing it for the church, right? Definitely, we could take that a little further, but you get the idea. And it's also important to keep that commandment in mind because as Catholics, we are also we're trying to set a good example, right? So it doesn't look very good if we're out doing things we shouldn't be doing and somebody kind of looks at us and says, isn't that person, aren't they Catholic? Should they go to such and such church? And they're busy doing something they shouldn't be doing, right? Not very good. Can we go one at a time, please? What's the third commandment? Right. What is that? What's the keep holy the Sabbath day? Right. That's the third commandment. What is God telling us to do there? Keep Sunday holy.
Sometimes things will come up, like when people get sick or you just can't go. But I think like if you just like try your best to be like honoring God on that day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it sounds difficult, is it like every day?
I didn't hear everything you said.
Why is it the Sabbath day like every day? Shouldn't you honor God every day?
You should honor God every day. I would agree with that. But I think what he's specifically saying is, we all get busy. I mean, Lord knows, especially today, when everybody's overscheduled and kind of doing a million different things at once. I think they're saying at the very least, and plus, again, go back, it's funny, I think years ago, the problem was that, like if you were, let's say you had a farm or whatever, you couldn't really take a day off easily. Like you're always working to work the farm, feed the animals, do whatever. Today it's a little easier in theory to take time off, but because we're again kind of so overscheduled and very busy, it's very difficult to take time off. So I think what they're saying is at the very least take one day where you make sure you go to church and you keep God in your mind. And I think one of the things I like about this commandment as well is it kind of reminds us to, take a little time for ourselves too. There's kind of an expression, there's a guy who's sawing down a tree, right? And he's in a hurry, he's trying to saw this tree down. And another guy comes up to him and he says, if you sharpened your saw, you'd probably cut the tree down quicker. And I said, I don't have time to stop. So the other guy takes 5 minutes, he sharpens his blade, he cuts down a tree and he cuts down the leaves. And the moral of the story is, like, again, if we take 5 minutes to do the things we need to do to kind of keep ourselves sharp, we're able to do a lot more. So because we're kind of running around like hamsters in the wheel, we don't really take time to do that sometimes, right? That's another reason why I like that one. Another thing that's important about this commandment too is keeping a sense of community. And I think this is something that we're kind of sadly lacking these days. There's a lot of very kind of sad, lonely people, upset, depressed people these days, and they can't seem to figure out why. And I think in a lot of ways, sure, life can be confusing, but there's a lot of things that are kind of obvious. And I kind of feel like the lack of a sense of community is probably a big part of that. Community was the thing that we took for granted for a long time, and now everyone is sort of so off doing their own thing that we kind of forget sometimes. Like, we're all in this together, So keeping a sense of community and keeping a sense of church is important. And church is one of those things. Again, you guys are at the age where, you're young teenagers now. Pretty soon you'll be in your 20s. It's very easy to get distracted and not go to church and not, feel that it's very important. But then, as you get a little older, you'll realize that you sort of miss it, and you'll kind of come back. And I guess my advice would be try not to get too far away and too far removed. You know, again, it's very easy to get distracted and also there's a trap that a lot of people fall into where, you know, they'll say, oh, I had an argument with some lady at church, I don't go anymore. You know, or somebody at the church, you know, said something I didn't like, I'm not gonna go anymore. I had a fight with this person, I'm not gonna go anymore. I've had that moment a couple times. In fact, not even that long ago. But think of it this way: if you went and had like a bad time in a movie, you went to the movie theater, somebody was making a lot of noise, really annoying, you wouldn't never watch movies ever again. You might not go to that theater again, or you might pick a different time or something. But you wouldn't like just give up on the movies. Same thing with this. If you have a bad experience with somebody, okay, move on. But don't hold the church responsible for that, if that makes any sense. Any questions about anything I'm saying so far? And by the way, a nice habit to get into when you go to church, throw $1 in the, probably our parents are throwing the envelopes in, or they're throwing, take $1. I mean, I know we don't have a lot of money right now, but throw $1. Just to kind of like, in your head, you do. What's the fourth commandment? Honor thy father and thy mother. Right. Who here does this all the time without fail? You guys don't honor your mother and father every day and respect them every single day without fail?
Only if they respect you.
Only if they respect
No, I
you.
swear, I swear.
Not fail. Not fail. I try to, but not fail.
Not without fail? Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being like, I never respect my parents, I'm never kind to my parents. 10 being like, I'm always. 5 being like, yeah. Like where are you guys right now? 7?
Like it's like a 6.5, 7.
6.5, 7.
6,
8? Okay. All right. At least nobody's below 5. That's good, right? Yeah. So when it comes to your parents, one thing to keep in mind, honestly, and this is one of those things where like I'm just sort of telling you from the bottom of my heart that this is true. Your parents, like unless there's something weird, like exception. I mean, I guess there's an exception to everything. But assuming you guys, reasonably get along, your parents are pretty normal, they're going to be your best friends for life. And when if you had a problem right now, like let's say, I was at a party and somebody did something really stupid, and I ended up, like the cops came and now I'm sitting in jail. I didn't even do anything wrong. Who's the first person you're calling? Like, is there any question in your mind who you're calling? When you get older, when you buy a house, when you have a child, who's going to be there? Your parents. And kind of like some of the other things that we're talking about, here's a secret about your parents. Okay. When your parents get on you to be responsible and be responsible and take care of what you gotta take care of, all that good stuff, and you feel like they're just on me for the sake of being on me sometimes. The irony of that is that I swear to you, your parents just want you to be happy. They literally just want you to be happy. They want you to not have any major problems in life. They want you to take for granted that you'll take care of things, responsibilities that need to be taken care of, so that you have time to do the things you want to do and to enjoy your life. It's when we talk about respecting your parents, it's not as if they're not expecting the slightest bit of pushback. They're going to tell you, be home at this time. You're going to say, how about I stay out till that time, right? They know that that's part of the deal, right? And it's not like they wish you would just sort of come home every night and never do anything wrong and just do everything you're supposed to do and never. They you know, again, they know you're gonna want to be your own person, and you know, they know that you don't want your parents over your shoulder every 5 seconds. And believe it or not, they're cool with that. And if you didn't do that, they would probably think it's kind of weird. So, you know, again, little push is okay. But again, always try to keep it at a reasonable level. If I had any advice in that respect, I would say, please, 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 don't ever say, what's the one thing you should never say to your parents? Is that? Yeah. I'm sure a lot of us have had that moment where we flipped our wig and said, I hate you. Don't ever do it again. Just not that. Anything but that. It's one of those where, and again, if you've done it, I'm sure you know, like as soon as you did it, like it was just hanging there in the air, and you just couldn't make it go away. It's a tough one. It's a tough one and again, it's like I said, as you kind of outgrow that you're gonna wish you didn't say it. What's the other thing I hope you don't say to your parents? Kind of just a little more of a stupid, funny one. But what else should you not say in front of your parents? Don't drop that bomb in front of your parents. Again, I know it sounds kind of dumb, and part of growing up, and part of, you know, what's kind of fun is as you get older, you start to be a little cooler with your parents, and before you know it, it's like, you know, you're telling your parents stories about like, hey, remember when I was a kid and I told you I was overstudying? Yeah, I was doing something I shouldn't have been doing. And you'll probably laugh about it. It's not the end of the world. But as you start to get comfortable with your parents, it's very tempting to start dropping the F-bombs. Remember what the sacrament says. It doesn't say love your parents. It says honor your parents, right? It says honor them. You should treat your parents with a certain amount of reverence. That you know, I might drop an F-bomb or two in front of my friends, and you know, it's not the end of the world. But for my parents, I treat them just a little bit with a little more respect than just a regular friend. Does that make sense? Anybody got questions or comments? Another thing is, a lot of times you will kind of get into debates with your parents about, how do I say this? How about this? Do you ever start to feel like your parents don't get it? Like your parents don't really get the real world. Do you ever have that vibe sometimes? Like my parents tell me don't do this, always do that, but they don't really get it. Have I ever start to think that? Like I said, put this under the category of like just I can't make you believe me, but I promise what I'm telling you is true. They probably get it a lot more than you realize. And honestly, when you start to have this kind of you ever see like in the cartoons, like you have the angel on one shoulder, the devil on the other shoulder, and that's your conscience kind of, you're having sort of a conversation in your own head about, you know, should I do this, should I not do this? You know, you'll probably have that kind of debate in your head, like, you know, my parents telling me not to do this, but you know, 9 times out of 10, I guarantee they do, and they will always steer you in the right direction. There's such a temptation to sort of feel like, you know, there's a real world out there, and then there's kind of like the old world that my parents sort of live in. Your parents live in the real world too, and believe me when I say that there's so much that it's going to seem like, you know, the real world stuff is going to seem like this is real life. But then after a while, you're going to realize, you know, my parents weren't that dumb after all. They were a little smarter than I gave them credit for. And a lot of the nonsense that, you know, people will sort of pretend is real life is kind of not. So again, when you find yourself kind of having that debate in your mind, and your parents are kind of like saying they're probably on to something. I'll just say that. What's the fifth commandment? Thou shalt not kill. What did we talk about in that class? Do I remember?
What's that?
Yeah, we talked a lot about abortion. Yeah, the thou shalt not kill commandment, that was the abortion talk. Not a very pleasant conversation, and again, it sort of falls into the category of like, look, we're not only are we all Catholics, and sometimes you have to have the talk, like think of it as like the heart to heart, where we talk about this is why we, as Catholics, we believe what we believe. But again, with that conversation, I hope that if anything sort of sinks in, it's not what I would like to. I wish I could almost sort of take the whole "we're Catholics" out of it, because I feel like it kind of has nothing to do with it, frankly. And I feel like when we talk about abortion and we talk about it, really what we're trying to get to is the truth. We're trying to get to reality. And I said, if that class has a theme, like a lot of things we talk about, they sort of fall into the category of like a certain theme. That one is quite simply just reality, just understanding reality and trying to strip away some of the stuff that we hear. Because there's a lot of people that will always kind of come at you and say abortion is perfectly fine, you're nuts, and they'll brush it off and say, well, you're a Catholic, so you have to believe stuff. No, I just believe reality, and again, we can have that conversation about whether or not it's what people would call like a necessary evil, or what society's role in that is. That's a conversation that's valid, but don't piss on my leg and tell me it's right. I mean, we're adults and we can talk about the reality of what it is. But like everything else, the other important part is that we don't mistreat or judge people that have made wrong choices or feel differently. We can educate. Yes.
I thought that the baby, when you had abortion, they weren't alive yet.
Sorry?
I thought the baby wasn't even alive yet.
You thought that the baby wasn't alive yet?
Yeah, I thought it was like they're not even alive.
It's very much alive. Yeah, it is, and like I said, it's not a pleasant conversation, but it is very much alive. It is very much a human being. It has its own DNA. I mean, again, it's not a complicated thing. It is a living thing by any definition, and to abort it is to kill a living thing. Like I said, we can have a larger conversation. I mean, we can get into a debate, for example, about the death penalty. You know what I mean? Whether or not that should be a thing. But what we wouldn't do with that is probably try to convince somebody that it's not really taking of a life. No, of course it is. It is. So like I said, have the real conversation. So, but it very much is. It is. And I'll be honest with you, I remember being in my early 20s and feeling like I didn't really know how I felt about it, frankly, because I was sort of hearing different arguments on both sides. And I had a friend one day, I don't remember why we had this conversation, but a friend of mine asked me about it. I said, what do you think about it? And I said, actually, honestly, I'm not sure, because I sort of feel like I understand both sides of it. And she said, well, what are both sides? I said, well, I mean, I certainly understand the idea that it's the taking of a life, and that's never really right. And I said, but the other part of me says, well, isn't it just sort of the killing of like a couple, clump of cells, and it, like I could scrape my knee, isn't that the same thing? And my friend said to me, she goes, well, that's not what it is. And she said, take a look at the tools that an abortionist uses. Okay, she said what they use is a clamp. It's a metal clamp, and on the end of the clamp there's a ring. It's a circular ring. Right? And she said the ring goes where the head is, and so I was like, oh. And I kind of never really knew that. So again, just sort of wakes you up to what it actually is.
It's like raped or something, and it's just really upset.
There's, I mean, it sounds kind of harsh to say this, but I'm just going to say it because we're being honest. That's a terrible evil that happened to that person, but it wouldn't change what would happen to the little baby if the little baby's born. What if maybe turns out to be a bad person? How would you ever? And frankly, do we kill bad people? That's not the point. Again, it's complicated. Like I said, I can understand people having a lot of questions about it, and having feelings back and forth. But at the end of the day, it's and again, like I said, I mean, as somebody who's been around and around having this argument for almost my entire life. In fact, it's always interesting to me. I remember, like, even going back as far as high school, it felt like every election, every 4 years, people start arguing about this, and nothing would really change. It's kind of strange. But again, it's no matter how you look at it, you sort of always end up in the same thing. It's the thing of life, and it's not good. And it's very easy to kind of get off on this subject. I mean, we can keep talking about it if we want, but we're also going to talk. Does anybody have any thoughts or comments you want to make?
It's not as bad as actually stabbing.
What's that?
It's bad, but it's not as bad as stabbing someone. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, logically, that makes sense. I mean, I've heard people make the argument, one school of thought is, like, let's say there's a burning building. Let's say there's a baby in a crib, and there's like a row of test tubes with little fetuses in them. What would you rescue? Well, yeah, I mean, I would rescue the baby, but but again, I'm making that decision because, again, I have emotions and I can see there's a baby there. I can't really see the babies that are in the test tubes. So yeah, I understand that logic, and I wouldn't claim that I would rescue the test tubes just because I happen to know mentally that, these are lives. Yeah, I grab the baby. But again, but we can sort of play these kind of, mental exercises, as long as we feel like, and like I said, we sort of always end up at the same conclusion, that it's not a good thing. And we don't, so. Does that kind of answer the question a little bit? Like I said, I'm not trying to convince everyone like that that I'm 100% right. It is a complicated issue. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that. I mean, it's kind of not a complicated issue, but the world is the way it is. Somebody, one of the kids in the other class sort of made the argument that, yes, it's immoral, it's a bad thing, but if we were to eradicate it today, it would cause turmoil in society. And I said I wouldn't even really disagree with that necessarily. But the bottom line is, like, if I could snap my fingers, let's say I was Thanos and I could snap my fingers and make it go away tomorrow. In a way, not that everybody forgets that it existed, but like they know it existed, but now it's not an option. What would people think? Like somebody who's sexually active, what would they think? They would say, "Oh wow, I guess I better really be careful now." I guess my answer would be, well, why can't we just do that now? Why can't we just say, okay, be really, really careful. Don't ever let that happen, and frankly, don't be with somebody unless you understand that you're running the risk of having a child. So I mean, yeah, we can snap our fingers, but we can kind of try to push the pendulum back the other way and kind of do what we can to say, hey, society, why don't we just all try to be a little more responsible and lessen this, Like I said, I can't make it go away tomorrow. None of us can. So we can kind of encourage better behavior so it doesn't really happen. If that makes sense.
Kill the movement. Anyone else have any thoughts, questions?
With suicide.
What's that?
With suicide.
What do you think?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
What do you?
The question is about suicide, or suicide murder. I would say it absolutely 1000% is murder. It's not murder I mean, obviously, the murder implies I went after somebody else and I took his life, right? I ended someone else's life. Right. So in a matter of speaking, right, it's not. But in what you're asking about is it a great sin the way murder is a great sin? I would say 1000%. God gave you the gift of life, and you kind of took it and said, no, thank you, and threw it back in his face, right? And another way I would sort of look at that is, imagine you heard somebody in your class was killed over the weekend. You woke up, you got news, somebody in my class was killed over the weekend. Imagine it was a car crash, right? That's terrible. But imagine you found out it was a suicide. Would you feel better or worse knowing that it was suicide? I would probably venture to guess you'd probably feel even worse because you just kind of your stomach would start turning, and you'd be like, why? Like this was a conscious decision on someone's part, and you'd probably start going through your, like, could I be nicer to that person? Was there something I could do to maybe, was there something I could have done to help? The bottom line is, I mean, you would feel as if somebody had been murdered. I mean, like, there's no part of you that would go, oh, I'm glad it was only suicide. Like, no part of you would do that. So, so the impact of somebody losing their life is no less, in any way, shape, or form if it's suicide.
My boyfriend's atheist.
Is being atheist a sin? I would say, I'm trying to think, is there an official answer versus, right. Listen, I think that the bottom line is, if you are a good person and you treat people right, and I don't think God has a problem with it. I certainly wouldn't call it a sin in the, regular way. I mean, we're here because we're Catholics, because we're receiving confirmation. We're confirming, yes, we want to be part of the church. Yes, we believe in God, and yes, we're here to be part of the church and to make it better. For us to reject that and say, no, thank you. Again, it's a sin, but I guess one of the answers, if you're an atheist, well, what do you care if it's a sin? Because you don't believe. If you believe in something, it's still being atheist. What's that?
They still believe in right. Most atheists, I don't want to kill someone simply because it's.
Yeah, right. I mean, I again, if you're a good person, then you're a good person. If you're a bad person, then you're a bad person. What's that? And do you pray for him to get into heaven? Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, I have friends who are atheists. I have friends who are proud atheists, and we kind of get into conversations, and I think atheism is very silly, and I told them, I said, it's one thing to be agnostic and say, I don't know what's out there. It's another thing to say, oh, I know that there's nothing out there. Well, how would you ever possibly know that? You can't know that. I've said to people, I mean, in the first class, I think I made this example. I said, I had a science class in college, a biology class. and the teacher openly mocked people, like literally said, "Who here believes in that the world was created in 6 days?" And like not many people, like 1 or 2 people raised their hand. And even I mean, I believe in God, but I think the 6 days, I don't think it's meant to be literal. You know, and I kind of knew what she was trying to do, so I didn't raise my hand. Probably should have. But so she's sitting there kind of like making faces and smirking at people who did believe it. Kind of rude. But then like the next class, we're sitting there watching videos. Like the very first thing we watched was, here's all the species that walk the earth. Here's man, and here's mammals, and here's all the mammals. And then it gets lower and lower. We get down to like birds and reptiles, and then it's fish, and then we're down to like these little single-celled things that are swimming around in the swamps. And I'm saying to myself, like, wow, this lady just made fun of anybody who believes in a higher power. But then she can sit there and talk about all of these creatures who are in the swamp who have no idea that there's people walking around. They can't possibly conceive that there are people walking around because they don't have the senses, they don't have the brain power. Like, she can't conceive that there's something more that we just can't conceive because we don't have we have five senses, and we think that's all the senses because we only know of 5 senses. She can't conceive that there's something else out there that we don't understand. So I mean, it always sort of cracks me up when I hear about like an atheist telling me like, "Oh, I know there's no God." Like, how would you possibly ever, like in a million years, you can't know that? So anyway, so like, yeah, and I think, and by the way, and yes, they all like have the same sense of right or wrong because we all sort of exist in the same community, whether or not we go to church or we don't go to church, but we all live in a community, that is what it is because of the values that came from being Christians. So they're kind of all still getting the benefit of being a Christian, even though they say that they're not. So,
Would a mercy killing is?
would a mercy killing be killing? Yeah, I mean it's.
Would it be justified?
Would it be justified? So that's a. I'll say this. That's a good one. Like
what about the 9/11 jumpers? If they were going to burn.
Trust me. Listen, they're not jumping because they just woke up one day and had a bad day. I mean, they're. And mercy killing. I mean, that's like a philosophical argument that I've had. When I was your age, frankly. It's interesting. I can't think of any scenario where it would be okay and justified. If somebody is in a lot of pain, and you're trying to ease their suffering, again, it's just one of those where it's like, it's certainly not my place to make that call.
What it's like taking someone off life support because they can't.
I mean, again, these are the big questions of life. These are the big ones, and they're tricky. If you take somebody off life support, technically you've done nothing wrong because they've had an accident or whatever, and they can't sustain themselves, and we're just finding these ways to keep them artificially alive. So again, I don't know. I mean, the bottom line is like I'm not positive, but again, it's an excellent question, and it's an interesting one. Yeah.
No, so if just like mercy killing can be justified, is that not the same thing as suicide? I mean, if you make the decision yourself, is that not the same as like mercy killing?
Well, I'm not advocating mercy killing. I'm not saying it's okay. I'm saying I understand the question. I understand the I'm not.
Would that be like the same sort of thing though?
I mean, meaning what? Like if I can take someone else out of there.
The person that is suffering and asks you to kill them, is that not the same thing as the person suffering killing themselves? It's just keeping on the middle.
I mean, it's an interesting question. I mean, to me, if you're talking, it's almost like you're kind of comparing things that I would have a hard time, like for me to be able to even answer that question, I have to, how do I make this an apples to apples comparison? You're talking about a mercy killing because someone is in great physical pain and probably terminally ill, right? If it was a real apples to apples comparison, you're talking about someone committing suicide who is also in great physical pain and terminally ill. then okay, I guess we can have that conversation. But if you're talking about just regular suicide, like I'm a teenager and life sucks and somebody made fun of me on Instagram and and I'm not belittling that. I'm just saying, somebody's going through something that seems like a really big deal at the time. I mean, a lot of the suicides that you hear about, it's not that example you're talking about. It's not because somebody was in great physical pain. It's because somebody, was bullied and stuff, and they're going through very difficult times and not really thinking like this is going to get better in a very short amount of time. So please don't kill yourself, that kind of thing. So again, like I said, I mean, it's an interesting philosophical discussion. But again, I kind of feel like there's probably no scenario where I'd ever say a suicide is justified unless it's the traumatic situation that you're talking about, where somebody is very, very sick and, can't ever get better, et cetera. I mean, any suicide is probably one of the worst tragedies you could possibly imagine, because again, you're probably talking about a life of somebody who, right now everything seems bleak and terrible, but just around the next corner, everything is going to get so much better because that's how life works. So, does that answer the question a little bit?
I think that the funny thing is, a lot of people, they like to use a theory of evolution to like disprove religion and stuff.
Mhm.
But Charles Darwin was a religious man.
I wish you were here for the first class. I did a whole presentation and I talked about that. Yeah.
It's like a clock, that science is the years.
What's that?
Did you compare like a clock where science is the years that make it work?
Yes, basically, I kind of did a whole presentation where I was talking about the theory of intelligent design. And I said a lot of people use evolution to sort of, say that no, there's no intelligent design, it's all random. To which I feel like the more you look at science, the more you look at all of that, you realize it's not random at all. What's that? I completely agree. I absolutely agree with that. Yeah, the whole theory that science is at odds with religion, I've never understood it. I've always thought that the weirdest hypothesis there could be. Like why in the world was that big? In fact, I made a joke when I did the presentation. I said, it's to the point where like somebody would have to cut their fingers and like some sort of fairy dust would have to come out before somebody would say, oh, maybe God exists. But frankly, if sea dust did come out, they would put it under a microscope and give it a name and say, okay, it's just science, it's not God. I mean, like how much convincing do you need to realize that the world has such order, that it just seems to work so perfectly. It's like how could you possibly just assume that this is completely random and that we are no more evolved,
Even not the rules.
Exactly, yeah.
Because it's just so unlikely that they can't all just keep happening.
Completely. Absolutely. No, that's extremely true. And they say, like, I mean, even just the stuff that holds the universe together, if any of those variables were off just by a little bit, the whole universe just couldn't hold itself together. So the fact that it was so precisely, works so precisely, accurately, it's hard to imagine it's just by accident.
Can I guess something about you?
What's that?
Can I guess something about you?
Sure.
I feel like you like Henry David Thoreau.
My Thoreau is pretty rusty, but tell me some Thoreau and I'll tell you if I
I just feel like you like civil disobedience.
Civil disobedience.
Yeah.
You know what? I would almost take that full circle and say I feel like I've kind of have seen and enjoyed enough civil disobedience to recognize that sometimes not doing that is there's a lot to be said for it. And I kind of feel like I'm sort of at the point in my life where I'm living long enough to realize that some of the things that have been around for thousands of years and work, like I'm starting to appreciate why they work and just like, why are we trying so hard to rebrand and be different. You know, it's almost like I feel like the whole world is kind of so counterculture these days that it's boring. And a lot of people don't even stop to realize what culture is before they try to be counterculture. So I almost feel like I don't know if I'm taking what I don't know if I'm taking that and taking it down a notch or taking it up a notch. But I like the idea. What's up?
So, you were saying narcissistic abuse, emotional abuse, all that stuff is against God's laws and rules, right?
Absolutely.
So what about when you're, just for an example, what about if your mom like threatens you, like that they're gonna take away your phone and stuff like that, and if that like hitting you when you say something, when you say a swear, is that technically abuse and emotional abuse?
I mean, how hard are hitting? You know, when I was a kid, we got hit pretty regularly, but you know, there's a line when it comes to. What do you wait till I got 4 minutes left to start asking me the big questions? You chill out until we're almost done, and then you
I want to see how fast you can get through this question.
how fast I can get through it. Like I said, it's put it this way. I think you probably know the line where discipline becomes abuse. You know, and if you feel like it's crossing the line, you're probably wrong. If you feel like, you know, all right, you know, I mean, again, like I said, when I was a kid, we got hit regularly. Today, it's not so much. So, what is your instinct?
I guess there's a difference between getting a slap on the wrist versus.
Right. I mean, I think there's a difference between slap and a punch, that's for damn sure. Right? I would say closed fist is probably. That's what we're talking about. But stay put up. All right, guys, why don't we stand up and do a prayer? Everybody good? Name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now at the hour of death. Amen. In the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Guys, thank you for coming tonight and for yeah. Feeling like you know what I meant to tell you? I started taking a karate. I should get one. I'm thinking about taking a karate class or self-defense class.
No, my parents don't allow me out of like how much to do.
What to do? Good night. Have a good one.
Dance, CCD, guard, piano, swim lessons, basically a lot on my body.
Don't blame me. All right, let's go.
And guard is 6 to 9:30 at night. And piano is Thursdays, Thursdays. Yeah. All right.
But we couldn't find the lights for the Christmas tree. We had to take Christmas tree, my grandma's allergic to those trees. And I have to go now in the attic after school tomorrow to get and find the Christmas lights.
Great.
And
Move your stuff, we'll walk over your stuff over here. Well, like I said, I mean, look, I'm 52 years old, like, I have to deal with my parents screaming down all the time, like, you know, it's not a good scene, you know, and it's frustrating, but again, if you feel like it's crossing the line, I mean, you have counselors and stuff at school, you know, I would not hesitate to talk to them and say, you know, and I mean, it might be perfectly valid to say, you know, I need a little baseline, I need a little default factory set. You tell me, you know, what is too much, you know? What sort of level is too much.